Right. So, second episode, and thank you for joining. Please subscribe because I don't want you to miss these weekly episodes. And for those of you that are following me on social media, you'll know that we're just doing these little reels, and it's really hard to get all of this life in there. So we're just putting together this 15-minute little fill you in bit. Where did we get to? So listen, it's not all fairy tales and rainbows, as I don't need to tell you, is it? Life, it can be a little bit of a roller coaster. And the point is, it is Earth School. What do we learn from it? These tests, these challenges, having to navigate. You know, it's almost like there is a divine, infinite source of information, and it puts what you want on the other side of a challenge. It's almost like the challenges that we face are the gifts, because there's equal amount of gifts in the challenges. So all still fairy tales and rainbows though. So we'd moved, obviously I'd married Stephen by Elvis, no doubt, in Vegas. And I remember the wedding vows were, do you promise never to step on his blue suede shoes? And I was like, I do. Will he always be your teddy bear? He will. It was all that. Anyway, so then we moved to Spain after all the Viagra stuff and set up the locale, did it all out. It was like me kind of having the experience in business, really piecing this together, building up a team, making it all look fantastic, investing in this beautiful place, which, by the way, is still running today, still 20 years later with another clinic. Always makes me happy. And they extended even more into dentistry and all sorts. Anyway, so Stephen's finally able to give half an hour to his patients, which was what he really wanted. He never liked it that pharmaceutical companies used to pay them to give, you know, nasty meds and, you know, 5-minute consultations. Anyway, he wasn't into the UK system. So suddenly he's got half an hour with his patients, we're offering them a really good service. But the point was, for that half an hour, we didn't overcharge them. It was like €40. And you imagine initially there's 2-3 patients a day, and people don't want to be sitting in a doctor's practice when it's glorious sunshine and beautiful Spain, do they? But they did want an English doctor on hand. So the long and short of it was, I've gone from, and some days, having 100 girls out earning €40 a day to like, hang on a minute, we've got like €40 compared to 100 of them. So it made no sense, and he wanted to be busier. We'd obviously still be there anyway. By this point, I'd started on Open University, training in normal modalities, and I mentioned about that last time. And, you know, we're doing great and we're enjoying life, but there wasn't the business. So I was like, right, let's put out these 3 big adverts and let's do like an insurance package. In effect, offer the whole services of a year in one package. And obviously that's inclusive of a well man, well woman medical. That's inclusive of, you know, all the blood tests, the tests they need, and peace of mind that they can have an English doctor at the end of the phone. And well, we put out the ad. Stephen was like really scared at first, going, no, they'll just be ringing me all the time and I'll be inundated. And I was like, no, listen, people are not wanting to sit in a doctor's clinic. You know, you might get 1 or 2 hypochondriacs, but that's it. And I was right. So very quickly we started to take in anyone who came through the doors was seeing this €1,000, whatever it was, something like that, as an offer, taking it for the couples, knowing it covered them all year. And then it was inclusive, it was great. So we'd get at least 80 patients then coming because of all this advertising we were doing every single week. And that's how we built up that business, actually, to revenues of about 4 million a year. Started to buy properties, other businesses, as in Aligned, another clinic we bought, and actually at one point we were going to open a hospice for the community, and we started to work towards that. Life was amazing, you know, we built up all of this incredible reputation as well, living in the town. We were like the pillars of the community. And yeah, it was good times. I had Jordan, obviously, and Stephen was like an amazing father to him, really was a fantastic father figure. And then a few years later, Chloe came along, and interestingly, Chloe, I'd planned to have her at home, and just in case, Stephen had ordered me in some pethidine so that I could have some pain relief at home. And little did I realise that him walking past that pethidine, which, as you know, is a derivative of morphine, every single day in that cabinet, because we'd had to order it in specially, I never used it for the birth, by the way, was triggering him back to when he had an addiction, which all got uncovered actually before he knocked on my door. Whole of the story to that, but he started to self-prescribe, as many doctors do, 25% of them, it said. So he was self-prescribing, and that was morphine. So I didn't even really make the dots. It was so long before, and it was in such a good place. But of course, having that in the medicine cabinet in the clinic and walking past it every day after I hadn't used it, I think Chloe was about six weeks old when he started taking that again. Anyway, a long period, 2 years down the road of an absolute chaotic scenarios that used to happen. Oh my God, you know, from cars in a ditch to, oh gosh, Chloe got meningitis around this same time as well. That was absolutely horrendous. Can you imagine? She's got meningitis and been rushed into hospital. I've gone home to get a bag. And this day I'll never forget, as I'm driving home, he's crashed his car. There's a whole police roadblock. He's out of it. And I couldn't even tell my husband, the father of my daughter, that she's in hospital, who's a doctor, that she's in hospital with meningitis, because he's just staggering around in the road not knowing what day it is. So they've stopped me, the police, and he's like, that's my wife. And I'm like, I can't even say, I've just got to get back to this hospital. Anyway, by the time I got back to the hospital, they took him, and at that point, to be quite honest, I was quite glad that they took him away, so I could focus on Chloe. And I got back to the hospital, and I remember looking through this little window, and there was all the doctors in there, and they said she'd gone into a coma and her body was swelling out of control. But I'll never forget this day as long as I live. And I prayed again, another prayer, and I said, show me, guide me, help me. And they were saying her brain is swelling out of control, this, creating all this panic. Well, this panic was created. And I was told to picture her singing. And I pictured her singing. All I did was just visualise. She used to sing anyway. She's only 2 or 3 at this point. And she used to love to sing. And I visualised her singing. Anyway, they took her to a different hospital, University Hospital. It's about an hour away, in the back of an ambulance. She was unconscious at this point. Paramedics and paediatrician doctors were there, and there was a whole group of doctors in the ambulance. But I just knew, I know it was strange, but I had this calm feeling that she was going to be okay. And I'd been picturing her singing, messaged some of my friends, didn't say she was unwell, just said visualise Chloe singing. And within about half an hour of us getting in this private room, imagine all the masks on because it's contagious, you know, and all of this stuff. And we get in there, and she sat up in the bed and she sang, how much is that dog? I'll never forget, doggy in the window. And I knew my prayers had been answered, and she started to get better. So it's all simultaneously happening. Anyway, she recovered, and I managed to get Stephen to go back for rehab. Wasn't quite as straightforward as that. A few hotels smashed up along the way, and a bit of chaos here and a bit of chaos there, and the whole world exploding around him prior to encouraging him to go back. And he does go back, and there's doctors' rehabilitation units, and I was really happy that he was going there. Someone picked him up from the airport and decided not to take him because he didn't need to go. Apparently he would be fine without his prescription pad. So he was being looked after, not going into rehab, which at this point he clearly needed. I'm at back managing it all, managing the clinics, looking after the kids, working it all out. I mean, one of our properties at that point, when I had many, had gone from 800,000 to like 300,000 overnight. There was a property crash going on. There was all these things I was juggling, like on my own with the kids, and not to mention all these thousands and thousands of patients as well that have prepaid. So we've got to look after them, take in new doctors. It was a mission with 2 small kids, but we did it, and I kept it all together. And there was one day, it wasn't easy though. I mean, you know, I'm a tough person, but it doesn't mean to say that it's easy and that I don't, you know, have a meltdown as well. And there was this meltdown one night, and I was like, oh, it's a lot. And I remember sitting on the steps just before I went home. I had a nanny and stuff, and she was looking after the kids. And I just remember sitting on these steps and just crying and just being like, God, show me, guide me, help me. Just make this easier. It just felt like so much weight I was carrying. And obviously a big believer in the power of prayer, with what Chloe had recovered by this point. And Stephen was getting help. So I just prayed that all would be well, but just show me, guide me and help me through. I remember crying. And then the next morning I get this phone call. It's like literally 9 a.m. It's like a London number in Spain. I'm like, that's weird. So I pick it up, not a number I know. And there's this chirpy voice on the end saying, hey Louise, we've seen an article that I'd written about 6 months before. We'd love you to come on the Trisha Goddard show and we want you to help this couple and all of this stuff. Would I do it? And I immediately knew that my prayers had been answered. I didn't pray for this, but this was the solution that I was being given. I said yes. And I knew that it was about a week away. I had to go on this live show. So I got the kids ready and they were fine with the nanny, and Stephen had gone a little bit off the rails. He'd been back probably about 3 months at this point and not gone to rehab, but he wasn't prescribing anymore. Apparently he was just drinking, and I'd said he wasn't coming back home to Spain until he got himself better and took it seriously. So and that was that. We'd speak every week, and it was waiting for him to get better and come back. And so I jump on the plane, I go in, I'm a bit nervous, but I clear my timeline and step into my power, knew that I could go on this TV show, end up doing this amazing job with this couple. She wouldn't get undressed unless it was dark. And to cut a long story short, I end up stocking suspenders she's got on, and the husband's all in love with her, and the audience is going crazy. And this is a woman who, wouldn't get undressed in front of her husband, let alone a whole studio, and she's all dolled up. So I'd really thrown the book at her, and it was live and it was scary. I was like, God, I hope this works. It worked. Came out, they wouldn't let me out of the studio. They made me sign a contract. I thought it was great. I wasn't really experienced in those days. I just signed this contract that they wanted me on every week, and it was going to be amazing. I was going to change people's lives, and I was going to be able to do this intervention, help people with stress and all of that. Over the moon, did it, signed it, left, all on a high. Everyone's ringing me, and then I get a phone call just on my way to the airport, and boom, my whole world changed in that moment. And Stephen had been found dead at the bottom of a cliff. Really unexpected. It was seen by a dog walker early in the morning. They'd said it was an accident. Obviously we didn't know what the heck had happened. I've now got to go back and explain to the children what's happened, when I was all on a positive, thinking Dad will be back, when he's better. He was only in his 30s. And I just remember walking around the airport, absolutely in floods of tears, unbelievable, unexpected shock. And I went back and did a celebration of his life, and, broke it to the children. And obviously it was harder for my son because they were very close, and he was like 8, 9. Anyway, 2 weeks later I had to go on the TV show, didn't I, and do relationship therapy. So it was 2 weeks later, and I had to go. I felt sick. I didn't want to go. But something magical happened that night. Stephen sat on my bed as close as you are sitting now. And he told me things. He told me things that meant I never grieved again. I trusted that everything was meant to happen. I knew why this high and this low had happened simultaneously. And the extremes of life work like that. Where there are highs, there will be lows. If you're going through a hard time right now, there has to be equal amount of gifts in it. If you're going through a good time, expect it to come crashing down. Because that's just the nature of life, or it just to be linked. Not everything's all fairy tales, not everything's all doom and gloom, is it? And actually looking back now, wow, 20 odd years later, the kids grew up amazing. And what he told me that day did change my life. I will share that with you on the next episode. But wow, what a ride. And I guess from coming out of that situation still in one piece and realising, look, I was going to sell the doctors, I sold it as a going concern, and life really now was to be lived, because who knows, it can be over like that. So I grabbed life by the balls and dedicated to do my best for the kids, but also to live a life that is worth living and embrace every single part of it. And that is where the Pleasure Professor really goes to town. Tune in to the next episode. Thanks for listening. Right.